Hello everyone, welcome to the Lightning Ball channel. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do so and activate the notification bell. Your support fuels my continued efforts. In our previous episode, Rimuru defeated Level Rage and was elevated as the Great Demon Lord. In this episode, we entered the final chapter of the TenSura main novel, the Postwar Aftermath, and the story of Rimuru traveling through time to save Miss Shizue and Satoru. So, let's get started. The Tenma Great War finally came to an end. Peace returned, celebration spread across the world, and the lingering chaos gradually settled. As always, the Monster Federation played a central role in post-war reconstruction. Rimuru dispatched citizens of Tempest across the world to assist with recovery. This wasn't just aid, it was flawless PR, effectively dissolving human prejudice against monsters. Rimuru's territorial borders barely changed, but de Gruel's land, the barren land Damargania, became a major issue. The entire divine war had taken place there, leaving the land uninhabitable for humans. The reason was clear. When Rimuru cleaved Luvalraj with Elpis, the Genesis Grade Blade embedded with 4 true dragon cores, even though nihilistic collapse had minimized the impact, the residual energy still devastated the terrain. And thus began the legendary blame-shifting conference. Objectively speaking, fault was hard to assign. Defeating Luvalraj required energy capable of destroying all dimensions. Even a tiny leak was something the central world couldn't endure. The outcome was already close to ideal. Still, someone had to take responsibility, so Rimuru attempted to pin it on Veldora. Veldora vehemently denied it. The sisters had no intention of taking the blame either, and Velzard and Velgrind mercilessly piled on, declaring it was the foolish little brother's fault for overdoing it. Just as Veldora was being cornered, Velgaia suddenly spoke up, siding with the sisters, while neatly changing the subject. Milim and Rimuru exclaimed almost in unison, Velgaia could talk. Most likely he had absorbed the yin-yang orb taken from Luvalraj, condensed essence of Veldanava and Lucia, granting him language and high intelligence. More importantly, Velgaia turned out to be a high EQ little brother. He sweet-talked the sisters, openly praising their beauty, instantly winning over Velzard and Velgrind. They concluded that this child was nothing like Veldora, clever and adorable. Veldora simmered with jealousy towards this arrogant brat, yet was also relieved that the spotlight had shifted. Rimuru stepped in to placate him. Digging further would only implicate Rimuru himself, so letting it slide was the best outcome. Their relationship should always be like Veldora causing problems, Rimuru cleaning them up. Annoying, yes, but to Rimuru it was familiar and oddly comforting. Naturally, this sentiment was kept secret to avoid inflating Veldora's ego. As for post-war arrangements, the world structure didn't change much, despite Rimuru becoming Great Demon Lord. However, de Gruel's territory, though turned green by Veldora's fertile paradox, remained agriculturally unstable due to Elpis's residual energy. The interim plan had Rimuru resettle hundreds of thousands of giant refugees at construction sites in Eurazania under Geld's command. The Monster Federation provided food, clothing, and housing. The giants offered labor and learned large-scale construction techniques. Once the land stabilized in a few years, they would return to rebuild their nation. Milim adjusted her territory as well. Gistav was transferred to Kigali, who ascended as queen as agreed. Laplace, eager to serve the new queen, was promptly dragged away by his wife Sylvia and daughter Elmesia, both queens themselves. Though he looked miserable and attempted several escapes, he ultimately became a Yorozuya, assisting Rimuru and others. Amid the noise and bustle, global reconstruction progressed steadily. When Rimuru returned to the Monster Federation, he received a hero's welcome, followed immediately by crushing administrative work, restoring the underground labyrinth via Ramirez's authority, reactivating stalled institutions, and returning daily life to normal. Of course, everyday troubles persisted. Sue discreetly reported that, out of Rimuru's sight, Shuna, Sheon, and Milim were waging an intense holy war over the title of Rimuru's legal wife. Unsure how serious any of them were, Rimuru could only rub his temples and sigh. To confirm a few things, perhaps related to reproduction or human physiology, Rimuru attempted to transform into his past life Satoru form. It had worked not long ago during the battle with Veldanava, but the moment he tried, Seal delivered a cold system message. Execution failed due to an anomalous error. Rimuru knew perfectly well there was no such thing as an anomalous error. Seal was lying. She had deliberately locked the function. Still, Rimuru, ever the self-soothing slime, gave up resisting. He armored himself with the logic that being immortal meant no need for marriage or children anyway, since that would only invite conflict. Typical Rimuru. However, Rimuru's theory that long-lived species didn't need marriage and descendants was immediately shattered by his subordinates. Despite having no lifespan limit himself, Benimaru somehow ended up winning big in the many-children department. With Albus, he had a genderless child, whom Rimuru named Kuja, meaning the red serpent. With Momiji, he had twins, a boy named Enju and a girl named Kureha. All three were born exceptionally powerful, strong enough to qualify as Demon Lord seeds from birth. Gabiru and Sufia followed up with a lightning-fast marriage and child, and Rimuru named their daughter Ryoko. Watching his subordinates sprint so far ahead in life, Rimuru offered his blessings, but also felt a deep sense of loneliness. It seemed that the only truly close friend he had left was Gobta. The baby boom stirred the women's camp into action, and free combat love ideology went fully active. Luminous, speaking as someone who had been there before, teased Rimuru, reminding him that harem wars were something even the divine ancestor found exhausting. Hinata shot Rimuru a cold, resigned look, likely having heard some questionable rumors. Chloe stuck close to Rimuru, declaring him her one and only teacher, but in Cheon's and Shuna's eyes, Chloe was anything but innocent. Cheon insisted she was Rimuru's only secretary, something that would probably drive Diablo insane if he heard it. Shuna, meanwhile, judged Chloe to be even more dangerous than Cheon, a highly strategic opponent requiring extreme caution. Melem, on the other hand, was genuinely childlike, claiming she was Rimuru's best friend and should come first, without really understanding what marriage even meant. Ramirez tried to join the Holy War by using her adult form, but within days she reverted to a child and angrily complained to Rimuru. Because this growth had been an abnormal acceleration fueled by Rimuru's power, she worried her growth cycle had been messed up and that she might be stuck as a child for thousands of years. Rimuru later shared more power with her, and she instantly returned to her adult form again. The conclusion was simple. As long as she borrowed Rimuru's energy, she could freely switch forms. Rimuru nudged her toward a realization. Being a child meant she could play freely and pursue her favorite research without adult responsibilities. Ramirez found this logic flawless, withdrew from the Holy War entirely, and happily went off to brag to Trainee and the others. Even though Ramirez's issue was resolved, the Holy War had already become routine. Rimuru started worrying that if he ever acknowledged a legal wife, he might also need concubines, especially with Benimaru as precedent. The more he thought about it, the more unbearable it sounded, so he chose to delay again. At that moment, the partner who had been blocking his transformations and controlling everything dropped a casual bomb in his mind. Seal, with what felt like a mischievous smile, remarked that no matter what happened, the official wife would always be herself. Rimuru felt like he heard something, but out of pure survival instinct, he did what he always did, pretended not to hear, and postponed the problem. After everything settled and some peaceful time passed, Rimuru returned alone to his room and quietly activated Time Warp. His destination was the past, the Tokyo air raids. B-29 bombers filled the sky, and the city below was a sea of fire. Rimuru now possessed the power to save this hell, but he knew that doing so would rewrite history, and the Rimuru of the present would cease to exist. Even with ultimate power, not all tragedy could be erased. Overwhelmed by helplessness, Rimuru reminded himself again and again, never become arrogant. He had to turn away from what he couldn't save and focus on his true purpose. In the flames, Rimuru found a dying woman, the mother of Shizue Ezawa. She had just witnessed her daughter being summoned and vanishing into another world. One arm was gone, her body was badly burned, But more painful than the injuries was the despair of losing her child. Without hesitation, Rimuru teleported her away from the bombing and administered a complete recovery potion. The burns vanished instantly, and her lost arm began to regenerate. In truth, Rimuru was prepared to devour and reconstruct her if the potion failed. When she asked who he was, Rimuru gently put her to sleep. With her mother saved, the real focus began. Rimuru softly addressed the soul sleeping deep within himself, Miss Shizue. He told her that her mother was alive and had been desperately worried about her. Feeling that Rimuru had honored his promise and saved her, Shizue smiled. This was Rimuru's unilateral decision. No one in the Monster Federation knew. Shizue had never truly died. Her body had collapsed after Ifrit's departure, but her soul had remained within Rimuru, quietly shining. This wasn't resurrection of the dead. It was awakening the sleeper. Using Shizue's bodily data, Rimuru reconstructed her. Miss Shizue revived as her genuine self, appearing as a girl of about 10 years old, an age that could be explained to her mother and allowed her to restart the life she never finished. Shizue realized the burns on her face were gone. The curse that had bound her in that world was no more. She thanked Satoru for saving her. Rimuru, in turn, thanked her for entrusting him with her form back then. Wishing Shizue a strong future, Rimuru went overboard, pulling out a full gear package, a legendary-grade Kodachi, tens of thousands of recovery potions, and a magical storage bag. Shizue stopped the overprotective demon lord with a wry smile, saying she didn't need that much. She was strong, after all. Rimuru, prepared to never see her again, simply wanted to give her everything he could. As Shizue cheerfully sent him off, she left him with one final line. They would definitely meet again someday. With a quiet, "I hope so," in his heart, Rimuru flew toward his next destination. He had finally repaid the debt to his very first guide, and the person who shaped his fate. Rimuru stood among rows of towering skyscrapers, listening to the sirens and urban noise, and felt a wave of nostalgic vertigo wash over him. Before his eyes was Tamura, a junior colleague, crying while holding the body of a kind man who had been stabbed, with Miho, Tamura's fiancée, beside him. For Rimuru, this had happened years ago. For Tamura, it was a tragedy unfolding right now. Diablo, who had been following along, suddenly said he had some personal business to take care of. Rimuru sighed helplessly and let him go. Rimuru walked up to Tamura and patted him on the shoulder. Tamura froze, stunned into silence by the sudden appearance of an otherworldly beauty. Rimuru ignored his confusion and went straight to work. He took out a pseudo-soul from his chest and brought it close to Satoru Mikami's body, merging it instantly. Then he poured a recovery potion packed with highly refined magicules over the corpse. The wounds healed at incredible speed. He even accounted for residual pain, because Rimuru didn't want his revived self screaming in agony. The body had lost its original soul, well, because its soul went to the central world, but its physical activity remained. Rimuru focused and transplanted his multiple parallel existence into the pseudo-soul. Rimuru himself normally couldn't use parallel existence, and the exact mechanics of this multiple parallel existence were never explained. Just take it as a fun detail. To me, this feels more like a cloud-terminal relationship. Rimuru is the cloud, while Satoru's consciousness functions as the terminal. Anyway, this is just my own interpretation. There's nothing official about it. We'll have to wait for a clearer explanation in the future. Back to the story, Seal immediately confirmed success. Skills could still be activated normally in this world. That meant Rimuru's current consciousness had successfully split and anchored itself into his original body. When Diablo returned from his errand and the two prepared to leave, Tamura finally couldn't hold back and spoke up. Facing the confused junior, Rimuru felt no obligation to explain. He left behind only a crucial piece of advice. He called Tamura by name and told him to properly respect his seniors, instead of constantly trying to show off pointless nonsense. Also, Rimuru said he would handle his own computer, and that old request was officially canceled. Leaving an even more confused Tamura behind, Rimuru grinned and casually activated Time Warp, disappearing from the scene. The explanations could be left to the revived Satoru. The perspective shifted to Satoru Mikami, lying in a hospital bed. He smelled antiseptic and felt the familiar body he had lived in for 37 years. His first instinct was to confirm that a certain precious part was still intact. He rarely used it, but keeping it operational was basic courtesy. Then, deep self-doubt set in. Was all of this just a dream? A long isekai fantasy triggered by being stabbed? Tamura walked into the room and shattered that line of thought. He pointed at the suit hanging on the wall, stained with dark red blood and torn open, proving that the stabbing had absolutely happened. Tamura mentioned that an unbelievably beautiful girl, someone even celebrities couldn't compare to, had saved Satoru's life. With that much blood loss, survival was impossible without something extraordinary, which meant the otherworld experience hadn't been a dream, it had been real. The moment Satoru accepted that reality, a familiar voice echoed in his mind again, stating that everything had gone exactly as expected. Satoru was completely stunned. He realized he could still use abilities similar to Great Sage. He understood that he now possessed a backup of Rimuru's memories. Rimuru had returned to the central world, and Satoru's access was limited, but he could sense that Rimuru still had full awareness of this world. Satoru asked if the voice was Seal. The voice chose silence, which pretty much confirmed it. Satoru realized that his earlier, maybe it was all a dream doubt had been a prank, by Rimuru, and therefore by himself. That bastard was definitely laughing on the other side. In front of Tamura's disbelief, Satoru remained unusually calm. Tamura mentioned the police would come to collect information about the murder, but Satoru knew they'd be wasting their time. Diablo's earlier disappearance had clearly been to deal with the random killer, and since even Testarossa and the others had taken action, the culprit was surely enduring a level of torment that would make him regret being born, especially with Ultima, who specialized in that sort of thing. Still, despite how absurd everything sounded, Tamura chose to believe his senior. Late at night, Satoru's parents and elder brother arrived. His brother, a doctor, immediately flicked his 37-year-old little brother on the forehead. His father was gentle, his mother doting. The warmth of family, so long forgotten, filled Satoru with nostalgia. During their chat, his mother mentioned how Satoru had been spoiled by his late grandmother as a child. His grandmother had insisted, even before his birth, that he would be a boy and demanded the name Satoru. And her name, astonishingly, had been Shizue Izawa, known as Oni no Shizue, a legendary post-war woman said to have never lost a fight, capable of cutting bullets apart with a short blade. Satoru finally realized it. Miss Shizue, the fated person he met in the other world, had been his own grandmother. His reckless grandfather, who had fallen in love at first sight and pursued her head-on, had miraculously succeeded, leading to his father and then Satoru himself. His grandfather had looked exactly like Satoru when he was young. Back to the story again, Satoru's family handed him a package left by his grandmother. Inside was a short sword, the very one Rimuru had once given Shizue, and a letter. In it, Miss Shizue thanked Rimuru for saving the children, Hinata, Yuki, and for reuniting her with her mother. She wrote that after learning Leon's true feelings, her resentment had faded. What moved her most was never imagining that the one who ended wars, guided the world to peace, and even became a god, Rimuru, would be born as her grandson. To Shizue, Mr. Rimuru was simply little Satoru, her beloved grandson. She wrote that she had lived happily, and while she regretted never playing games together, seeing life continue was more than enough. After finishing the letter, Satoru closed his eyes and prayed silently for Shizue's happiness. As long as she was at peace, so was he. That evening, Tamura brought him fresh clothes. Satoru's first question was about his computer. Tamura admitted he'd tried, but the password was too strong to crack. Satoru swore never to get hospitalized again and give people that chance. After discharge, he and Tamura went to a bar. Satoru asked him if he said he'd gone to another world after dying, would Tamura believe him? Tamura answered seriously that he would, because that mysterious girl's way of speaking had strangely resembled his senior. Facing such a sharp and reliable junior, Satoru smiled. He said he could tell Tamura exactly what had happened. Did he want to hear it? Tamura eagerly asked him to tell everything. And so, with that settled, Satoru began his story. The title was, That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. Alright, that was all for this video, and honestly, this was all for this series. It was kind of unreal to realize that from the very first upload to now, almost 3 years had passed. Looking back, I was genuinely glad I made the decision back then to commit to this series. And if you watched it all the way through, you probably also witnessed something else along the way, the progress of AI itself. It was honestly unbelievable. If you went back and watched episode 1 now, it would be painfully rough. Even episode 54, looking back today, still felt crude. Before starting whatever comes next, I might remake a few classic episodes using current tools and techniques. I'll keep everyone updated once there's a concrete plan. There were also a few analysis videos I still wanted to revisit, like the Chloe's countless 1,000-year loops, especially when factoring in Lucia's soul. That topic in particular felt even more worth redoing properly. I might also make a video sharing my personal top-ranked battles, just to put my thoughts out there. Since this series had wrapped up, future uploads would probably become more irregular, and honestly, that would also give me a chance to rest a bit. As for what series comes next, I still needed some time to think. A lot of people had recommended many novels, but since I hadn't read most of them, I felt I needed to read them myself first. If I didn't genuinely like the story, I wouldn't be able to make good videos out of it. I thought that when I finally reached this episode, I'd have a lot to say, but in the end, it felt surprisingly quiet. This channel will continue for sure, and the one thing I could promise was this. The next episode would be just as exciting. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support was greatly appreciated. See you in the next one.